few other tips that I have that address some of our challenges. Stuff that applies to small groups, medium groups, and big groups. I want to talk about good questions. Okay, so the way to phrase science questions that I've had really good experiences with, and why. I don't like to give yes or no questions or duality questions, because then you're giving the students a 50% chance of getting right just by guessing. They could flip a coin, and you have no idea if they understand or not.
Yeah.
But I understand you need yes and no questions sometimes, okay? Help with momentum, you don't have time for a long discussion. So if you're forced to do yes or no or duality questions, does it go up or down or left or right? I like to follow it up with a why. Just like we did with our hypotheses, right? You didn't get to just say what's going to happen to the balloon. You had to explain your thinking and your reasoning. So, using what we've talked about. When we held the ball there, we could have said, hey students, does the ball move right or left? But instead we said, what happens to the ball? More open-ended. I like what happens to the ball. Also, we could have said, is the airplane wing moved up or down? Instead you say, what happened to the airplane wing? So, right here, you could say, should the oxygen molecule have one bond? But that's a bad question. Much better than that is, what's wrong with this oxygen molecule? What's wrong with the drawing of this oxygen molecule? Make them think a little more. It's not just, is there only one bond? Okay? And then we'll talk about another aspect of good questions. That is follow-up. Don't let them off the hook. Okay? So, Vincent, I'm going to ask you what's wrong with this oxygen molecule. I want you to say, I got no idea. What's wrong with this oxygen molecule, Vincent?
No idea.
Well, in that case, it's missing a bond, Vincent. There's supposed to be two bonds. And that's bad. Okay? Or Vincent says, I don't know. He can't come up with an answer, even if he's sincerely trying, right? And then I just go to another student. What's wrong with it? That's not as good either. We don't want to let students think they can avoid questions by just giving up. Okay? So, you do it, and not only do you help his understanding, you help all the students realize that you're going to come back to them. They're not getting off the hook. But not in a mean way. So, Vincent, let's do it again. Vincent, what's wrong with this oxygen molecule?
I don't know.
Okay, Vincent, how many bonds does oxygen like to make? Say I don't know again.
I don't know.
Vincent's killing me. He doesn't remember anything from yesterday's lesson. Okay. Then I might go to another student, right? Instead of just giving the answer when he gets it wrong or doesn't know, we go back to some earlier science, the foundation, right? Some early understanding that maybe can get him to reason to the correct answer. So then I go to Patrick, and I say, Patrick, how many bonds does oxygen tend to make?
I'm not sure.
Not sure? Okay. Raise your hand if you know. How many bonds do oxygen atoms like to have? 2. Okay. So he says 2. I say, okay, good job, correct. Then I come back to Vincent, the guy who couldn't get it wrong. So, what was your name? Dedas tells us that oxygen atoms, they like to have 2 bonds. That means 2 bonds touching them. So Vincent, what's wrong with this oxygen molecule?
Has only the one.
It has only one. How many should it have?
2.
Excellent! Yay! Okay. We're all there. We got there, and we didn't let Vincent give up. We reviewed some earlier science, but let's make it even harder. Let's say we went to Dedas, and Dedas, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I want you to say, I don't know. Dedas, how many bonds does the oxygen atom like to make?
1.
Okay, that's incorrect. So, Dedas, everybody, pay attention. And don't draw with me, just pay attention. I'm going to draw you some molecules that have oxygen atoms in them. and I want you to deduce a pattern. Notice something. And then you can draw CO2, nice and simple and easy. You can draw, acetic acid, vinegar, something they're familiar with. Same thing, okay, you know where I'm going with the rest. And you say, guys, what do you notice? How many bonds tend to be touching each oxygen atom? And this is something that I usually did 3 classes or 5 classes prior, right? So it's a little review. But they forget. I mean, we're trying to cram so much into these kids' heads. If you don't review, they're not going to remember anything.
Yeah.
Review is so important. We'll talk about that a little more later. Anyway, they notice the pattern. They go to 2, and then we get back to Vincent. Same thing.